Eat Your Compost. You are listening to the teacher lesson plan of Eat Your Compost. This lesson is intended for students in grades 3 through 8 and will take about 30 minutes a day plus cooking time if you're doing the cooking activity. The teacher lesson plan includes an overview and some history on composting. On page 3, there is the purpose and learning objectives for students. Through this lesson, students will explore the topic of food waste and take action within their household to prevent it. Students will research potential recipes based on their available ingredients. Students will practice basic kitchen skills, such as measuring, mixing, and baking. They will learn the history of 3 ingredients used in their dish. Finally, students will express their cooking and dining experiences by participating in a creative writing exercise. The driving question for this lesson is, how does food waste impact the environment and what actions can we take to prevent it at home? This lesson has standards and topic connections for One Planet Living topics, NGSS, HSS, Common Core, and Environmental Principles and Concepts. There are adaptations and extensions listed at the bottom of the page. One example is having students share photos and recipes with the class and building a whole class cookbook. Now on to student instructions. Introduction. Did you know that in the United States, almost 40% of all food is wasted? Think about all of the energy it takes to get food onto your plate. The ingredients must be planted, grown, harvested, sorted, cleaned, processed, packaged, and transported to a distribution center or directly to a store via ship, airplane, or vehicle, picked up by your family, and finally cooked. After all of that, doesn't it seem silly to let food get thrown away? Think about why your family might unintentionally be wasting food. Did you buy a pack of strawberries that was too big, so they got moldy before you could eat them? Did you have an old can of soup that got lost in the cabinet and no one remembered? We might not realize it, but another way we waste food is by composting it when we don't need to. Composting is a good option to get rid of inedible food items, but a lot of the food scraps we put in the compost are still good to eat and can be used for other recipes. By paying attention to and thinking creatively about our food scraps, we can prevent more food from going to waste. In today's lesson, you'll record the food waste you generate over 3 to 4 days and write a recipe and food review using as many food scraps as possible. Now for some history. Albert Howard is known as the father of modern composting for his work in the early 1900s experimenting with organic gardening and farming. However, people have been using organic material to improve their crops since farming began over 12,000 years ago. Tablets found from the Akkadians in Mesopotamia from around 2300 BC are believed to be the oldest written reference to compost. In the U.S., there are records as early as 1621 of the Pilgrims being taught composting methods by Tisquantum, known commonly as Squanto, the Patuxet man who acted as their interpreter. In 1999, the first large-scale curbside composting collection in a U.S. city was started in San Francisco. This program was called the Fantastic Three and is still in use today. RethinkWaste, which was founded in 1982, uses a 3-bin system as well. Key terms. Compost, a nutrient-rich fertilizer made from our food and yard scraps. Anything we put in our green compost bin becomes fertilizer. Food scraps, any uneaten or inedible food. Our food scraps can go into the compost bin or be turned into a delicious meal. Recipe, a set of instructions for preparing a particular dish. It includes the list of ingredients and can also include measurements of ingredients. You will need a pen or a pencil, a notebook, and basic cooking tools. Optional items are a food scale and a bowl. Instructions and materials. Recommended. If you decide to cook your food scraps recipe, you may need help using sharp kitchen tools and hot appliances. Hire an adult to be your assistant chef. Observe any food, for example, extra bones or old bananas, that is thrown away and document it. Option 1. If using a food scale, put waste from each meal in a bowl and weigh. Option 2. If not using a food scale, count the number of food items that are wasted. For example, 3 chicken bones, 2 old bananas. Add to this list every time you observe food waste for 3 days. With permission, you can save some food scraps and store them in a bag in your freezer for future use. Make sure you collect the food scraps before putting them in the compost bin. After 3 days, examine the list of food scraps. Can you think of any meals or desserts that include the ingredients that you threw away? Create or look up a tasty recipe using as many food scraps as possible. You will use this for a creative writing exercise next. Here is an example of a food scrap journal. You can print this page out or copy it into your notebook. Writing activity. For this activity, we will be practicing using descriptive language as a food writer. Please read the article below for inspiration. This article is about ulava charu tiffins. At this vegetarian offshoot of ulava charu, a southern Indian restaurant in Sunnyvale, multi-course tiffins are the focus. Ulava charu's style of cooking is distinctly home-style and hearty, from the silky and rich pongal rice to the thick and buttery Mysore pak, loaded with cardamom flavor and perfect with a cup of tea. When dining in, you eat lentils and rice, steamed rice cakes, or roti from metal trays, while the other varied elements of the meal, chutneys, spicy lentil stews, and deeply flavored sauces, presented in small metal bowls. Here, every dish is presented as a consortium of flavors, set meals, whose components are meant to complement each other. The dosas are really some of the best in the Bay Area. The menu features 22 variations, with myriad fillings and batter mix-ins. The lacy onion rava dosas are made with a thin, unfermented batter of semolina, rice, and wheat flours splashed over sliced red onions on a hot griddle. The dosa is then folded 3 times, much like Chinese jianbing, and served with a spicy and sour tomato and lentil sambar and coconut, tomato, peanut, and ginger chutneys. I hear that these accoutrements are refilled generously when you're dining in. Sadly, takeout is less extravagant, with everything in plastic containers and foil and no refills. I ate my dosa on the trunk of my car, exposed to the same ambient seasoning that heightens every taco truck dinner. A bit janky, but it only got me more excited to come back later and finally have the tiffins the way they're meant to be eaten. This article was written by 2 food journalists from the San Francisco Chronicle, Soleil Ho and Carolyn Jung. Food journalists visit restaurants in their communities and write about their experiences. They often include details about what it felt like to dine at the restaurant, including comments about the decor, music, and staff. But they will always write in-depth descriptions of the dishes that they try. For this assignment, use your imagination to write about your experience creating and eating your dish. For example, you could ask yourself what the strongest flavors were. Is it something that you would want to eat on a warm day or a cold day? How did eating the dish make you feel? What smells, colors, and textures stood out in your dish? Your article should include at least 1 paragraph about your cooking experience and at least 1 paragraph about your dining experience. Do your best to add adjectives and adverbs when writing your review of your compost meal. Bon appetit and happy writing. Now, let's learn about food history. Pick 3 ingredients that are important to your dish. Once you have decided the 3 ingredients that you want to focus on, fill out the form below for each ingredient. You will write down the name of the ingredient, what country the ingredient comes from, when it was discovered, and who it was discovered by. You will also write where it is grown and what dishes it is often used in. You will also find out what country your ingredient was grown in, how many miles that is from your city, and if this ingredient can be grown in California. Reflection questions. In this lesson, we learned about how to creatively use our food waste to make new food. Question 1. Why is it important that we reduce food waste as much as possible? Besides the food itself, What else is wasted when we throw away uneaten food? Question 2. What is one benefit of trying to buy items that are grown or made closer to where we live? Question 3. What was the most surprising fact you learned about your ingredients? Question 4. In addition to being a compost chef and thinking about how to use food scraps before composting them, what is one more way your family can reduce food waste? Here are some sample recipes. For these recipes, we will pretend that our food scraps are 5 pieces of wilted kale, 2 onion tops and bottoms, 10 carrot peels, 1 Parmesan rind without wax, cheesecloth, or paper, 6 chicken bones, 1 sweet potato that is half squishy, and 2 orange peels. Possible recipes. Here are 3 examples of recipes compost chefs could make using some of the food scraps listed above. Remember, your recipe doesn't have to include all of your food scraps, but should include at least 2 different food scraps. Compost casserole, inspired by the link here. Food scraps: 5 pieces of wilted kale, 10 carrot peels, 1 Parmesan rind, 1 sweet potato that is half squishy. Cut off the squishy part. Additional ingredients are 1 pound of pasta, fresh cut parsley, and 1 cup of shredded cheese. Steps: 1. Preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. 2. Cook the pasta according to the instructions, which are probably boiling the pasta for 10 minutes. 3. Grease a 9 by 13 inch dish with butter. 4. Cut up the vegetables and herbs, the kale, carrot peels, half of the sweet potato, and the parsley. 5. Grate the Parmesan rind. 6. Add the cheese, vegetables, and herbs to the pasta. 7. Put the mixture into the greased 9 by 13 inch dish. 8. Bake the casserole in a 350 degree Fahrenheit oven. Food scrap stock, inspired by the link here. Food scraps: 5 pieces of wilted kale, 2 onion tops and bottoms, 10 carrot peels, 1 Parmesan rind, 6 chicken bones, 1 sweet potato that is half squishy and cut off the squishy part, 2 orange peels. Additional ingredients are 1 tablespoon of olive oil, a 1/4 cup of fresh thyme, 8 cloves of garlic, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 2 quarts of water. Steps: 1. Chop vegetables: kale, onion, carrots, sweet potato, garlic, into 1-inch chunks. 2. Heat olive oil in a big pot. Then add kale, onion, carrots, sweet potato, garlic, and thyme. 3. Add Parmesan rind, chicken bones, orange peels, salt, and water to the pot and bring it to a boil. 4. After reaching a boil, lower the heat to simmer. Make sure the pot is not covered for 30 minutes. 5. Strain the mixtures so you separate the chunks of vegetables, fruit, cheese, and bones from the liquid. 6. Discard the leftover vegetables, fruit, cheese, and bones in the compost. 7. Use the liquid stock to make more dishes like soups. Candied orange peels, inspired by the link here. Food scraps. Orange peels of 4 oranges. 2 cups of sugar. 4 cups of water. Steps. 1. Scrape the pith or white stuff of the orange peels off as much as possible. The more you remove, the less bitter the candies will be. 2. Add the peels and 2 cups of water to a deep saucepan and bring to a boil. 3. Reduce the heat down to let the peels simmer for 15 minutes. 4. Drain the pan and add the sugar and the remaining cup of water to the peels. 5. Bring to a boil over medium heat, continuing to stir the peels until the sugar dissolves. 6. Once the syrup boils, drop the heat down and let the peels simmer for about an hour. During this time, the sugar is being absorbed by the peels, so it's important to take your time on this step. 7. Remove the peels from the heat and place on a cooling rack overnight. Save the remaining syrup in the pan and use it as a sweetener in tea or juice.